Hello everyone, and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Tensions at Forrester Creations had been simmering for weeks in the glamorous yet competitive world of Los Angeles high fashion, but no one could have predicted the explosion that was about to occur. Katie Logan, the stalwart head of public relations, has always been the unsung hero behind the scenes, handling crises with grace and keeping the Forrester name shining brilliantly amid scandals and rivalries. Recently, however, the company faced a big PR crisis due to the lingering impact from family problems, and Ridge Forrester, the co-CEO and eternal decision-maker, made a bold step without consulting her. He hired an outside public relations agency to handle the problem, thus relegating Katie to her own sphere. Katie felt betrayed, as if her years of commitment and competence had been dismissed. She told those close to her that it hurt badly, like a public vote of no confidence, even though Ridge assured it was only temporary assistance during a difficult period. Word of this decision circulated rapidly around Forrester Creations' slick offices, and it didn't take long for Bill Spencer, Katie's freshly restored love and now husband, to learn about it. Bill, the strong media magnate who has a history of fiercely protecting the people he loves, became enraged. He had always had mixed feelings toward the Forresters, especially Ridge, whose tangled sexual past with Brooke Logan, Katie's sister, had long fueled Bill's resentment. But this was personal. Katie had thrown her heart and everything into that firm, supporting Brooke and the family through many ups and downs, only to be overlooked when it counted the most. Bill couldn't stand it. He went into Forrester Creations one afternoon, his famous sword necklace gleaming in the lights, and demanded to see Ridge. The confrontation was intense, reverberating throughout the corridors and leaving colleagues murmuring. Bill accused Ridge of disrespecting Katie, undervaluing her contributions, and hiding behind justifications about the company's demands. Ridge justified his decision, claiming that it was merely a strategic move to bring new perspectives to a complex problem. But Bill didn't buy it. He interpreted that as the Forresters banding together, valuing their inner circle over Katie, who had always been more Logan than Forrester in their opinion. Voices rose, old grudges surfaced. Bill reminding Ridge of previous betrayals, Ridge lashing back about Bill's own manipulative background. It was a battle of the giants, two dominant males surrounding each other, years of bad blood bubbling over. Ridge's frustration culminated during the dispute, when Bill made an expressive gesture regarding Katie's worth. He had been struggling with his own pressures, family dynamics, Eric's remaining impact, and the ongoing tug of Brooke's devotion, which was divided between him and her sisters. Ridge's palm went out, connecting with Katie's face in a slap that wasn't meant for her, but hid in the turmoil when she stepped in to intervene. Katie had rushed into the office as soon as she heard the loud voices, desperate to quiet things down before they escalated any further. She positioned herself between the two men, appealing for reason, but Ridge's swing intended for Bill brushed her instead, or perhaps landed squarely in his blinded wrath. The room froze. Katie's palm rushed to her face, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Ridge quickly regretted it and apologized, but the harm had been done. Bill's reaction was sudden and fierce. That smack sparked Bill's full-throated declaration of war. Bill was no longer satisfied with just words, and resolved to make the Forresters pay for every wrong against Katie. He drew her close, murmuring promises of retribution, and took her out of the building, leaving Ridge startled and remorseful. Back at Spencer Publications, Bill's mind was racing with plans. He had previously stunned Katie with an extravagant wedding gift, a fully funded fashion firm of her own, a competitor to Forrester Creations that would allow her to step out of their shadow and create something genuinely her own. Bill doubled down, his blood boiling from the latest insult. He declared open war on Ridge and the entire Forrester organization, intending to utilize every resource at his disposal, his media clout, his contacts, and pure willpower, to promote Katie's new business while destroying Forrester at all costs. Katie, still suffering from the sting on her cheek and the emotional upheaval, found herself caught in the crossfire once more. She admired Bill's passionate loyalty and the way he supported her like no one else, but she was concerned about the consequences. Her sisters, Brooke and Donna, were firmly involved at Forrester, and this may irreversibly split the Logan family. Brooke was divided when she heard the news. She wanted to defend Ridge, but also felt sorry for Katie. She addressed Ridge personally, seeking explanations, but his remorse simply widened the gap temporarily. Donna attempted to mediate by moving between the two camps, but the lines were becoming increasingly clear. As the days progressed into weeks, Bill's war declaration manifested in subtle but devastating ways. He leaked stories through his media that highlighted Forrester's internal instability and called into question its leadership decisions. He quietly recruited talent, proposing enticing agreements to designers and executives dissatisfied with Ridge's recent actions. Katie's fashion brand quickly took shape, thanks to Bill's unrestricted funding, state-of-the-art facilities, top-tier recruits, and aggressive marketing campaigns positioning it as a new, innovative alternative to the stodgy Forrester tradition. Eric Forrester, the patriarch, provided silent support to Katie, recognizing potential in her concept and possibly a way to keep his creative juices running outside of Ridge's control. Ridge became very angry as rumors of defection spread. The personal toll was huge. Katie excelled in her new work, and her confidence grew as she produced collections that represented her exquisite, sincere style, gowns that empowered women, lines that glorified resilience. But the nights were filled with misgivings. Will this ruin her connection with Brooke? Bill convinced her that it was required justice and that the slap was the final straw, demonstrating that the Forresters never genuinely valued her. He pursued her persistently, reminding her of why they had remarried in that hasty, passionate ceremony. However, Bill's aggression terrified her at times. His war bordered on obsession, with late-night strategy meetings and veiled threats to reveal Forrester secrets. Ridge, troubled by his rash actions, attempted to atone. He offered Katie her position back with complete authority, including recommending that the outside firm be sacked. But it was too late. The trust had been broken. Brooke begged Katie to reconsider, and tears flowed as the sisters argued over commitment to men versus family relationships. Steffi Forrester, ever protective of her father, spoke out against Bill's tactics, accusing him of deception. Hope Logan, negotiating her own remarriage to Liam Spencer, found herself mediating, but the schism widened. Bill's campaign accelerated. He staged expensive launch parties for Katie's home, inviting influencers and celebrities who had declined Forrester's invitations. Katie's recovery story received favorable media coverage, while Forrester's stagnation under Ridge was mildly criticized. Sales for Katie's debut collection skyrocketed, stealing market share and driving Forrester into damage control. Ridge responded with bold new lines, but the feud had a negative impact on his creativity. Eric's relationship with Katie exacerbated the situation, as father and son argued about inheritance. Months into the conflict, weariness set in. Katie addressed Bill, urging him to calm down, not for Ridge's sake, but for theirs. The ongoing battle was stealing the joy from her accomplishments. Bill softened significantly, focusing on constructing rather than destroying, but the rivalry persisted. The slap that started it all became legendary in Los Angeles fashion circles, serving as a cautionary tale of how pride and passion can bring down empires. Katie's house eventually held strong, a monument to her talent and Bill's persistent support. Forrester adapted and innovated to survive. Families steadily healed. Brooke and Katie reconciled over shared history. Ridge learned humility. However, the war Bill launched permanently altered the scene, demonstrating that in love and fashion, one devastating moment can change everything. Forgiveness came, but the scars lingered, and what about the competition? It merely made both sides sharper, fiercer, and brighter. The bold and gorgeous world spun on, dramas never ending, hearts forever linked. When Katie's palm touched Ridge's cheek, the sound resonated louder than anyone expected. The harsh split of skin against skin stunned the crowd, but so did the emotional weight that accompanied it. Years of anger, betrayal, unsaid resentment, and buried anguish culminated in that single, impetuous act. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Ridge stood still, eyes wide, his hand lingering in the air as if to touch the point where Katie had struck him, unable to believe what had happened. Katie, breathing hard, was as stunned as everyone else, her eyes glistening with unshed tears and her body trembling with the sudden outpouring of emotion. Nobody noticed Bill at first. He'd been standing slightly away, watching the confrontation unfold with increasing concern. He'd seen Katie upset before, furious, even, but not like this. The slap seemed like a declaration of war, and Bill's instincts kicked in right away. His jaw tightened, his posture stiffened, and a dark flash appeared in his eyes. Ridge was used to provoking people, but this time he had gone too far, which Bill Spencer would not tolerate. Ridge attempted to regain his composure immediately, concealing his amazement with a usual blend of arrogance and offensiveness. He opened his words, evidently prepared to justify himself and turn the scenario into one in which he was the misunderstood victim. But before he could speak, Bill moved forward. The atmosphere in the room grew thick, heavy and oppressive, as all eyes switched from Ridge and Katie to the two powerful men now facing off. When Bill spoke, his voice was low and dangerously quiet, the type of calm that normally preceded a storm. He did not need to shout. He did not need to threaten. His mere presence sent the point clearly. Ridge had made a huge mistake, and there would be consequences. Katie then attempted to say something, perhaps to de-escalate the situation or to apologize for losing control. But Bill raised his hand slightly, not looking at her. It was not a dismissive gesture, but rather a protective one. He was not irritated with Katie. If anything, seeing her pushed to the breaking point strengthened his determination. Ridge had emotionally harmed her for years, bringing her into his orbit when it suited him, abandoning her when it didn't, and treating her feelings as collateral damage in his never-ending romantic instability. Bill had been quiet for longer than most people expected, but silence was no longer an option. Ridge scoffed, trying to retake the upper hand. He accused Bill of overreacting and getting involved in matters unrelated to him. He dismissed the smack as an over-emotional reaction, meaning that Katie's emotions were overblown and she was being dramatic. Bill's expression became more intense with each word. Ridge dug himself a deeper pit as he talked. Bill finally snapped back, telling Ridge of how much this concerned him. Katie wasn't just a bystander. She was not disposable. Bill adored her and would always defend her, despite their convoluted history. And, unlike Ridge, Bill was not ashamed to admit his faults or battle for those who mattered to him. The confrontation swiftly intensified, with hatred in the air. Old rivalries returned, bringing back years of competition, animosity, and broken egos. This wasn't only about Katie anymore. It was about everything Bill and Ridge had ever fought for: power, influence, women, and pride. The slap only sparked the fuse. Word of the tragedy spread like wildfire over Los Angeles. Ridge was followed down the corridors of Forrester Creations by whispering. Some were surprised that Katie had finally stood up to him in such a public and physical way. Others quietly stated they were not surprised. Ridge had a reputation, and it had eventually caught up with him. Meanwhile, Bill's reaction became a source of considerable discussion. People understood that when Bill Spencer declared war, it was never a mere threat. Katie, meanwhile, was left to deal with her own emotions. The slap kept replaying in her thoughts. Part of her felt terrible and ashamed about losing control. Another section had an unexpected sense of comfort. For once, she hadn't suppressed her emotions or pretended to be understanding and forgiving. She had responded honestly, raw, and uncensored. While she did not condone violence, she couldn't deny that Ridge had pushed her too much. Bill remained close to her in the aftermath, his protective instinct strong. He told her that she had nothing to answer for and that Ridge's actions had been inexcusable. His support was intense, almost scary, and it both consoled and terrified Katie. She knew Bill well enough to realize that when he became enraged, it might lead to disaster. Ridge, for his part, alternated between wrath and uneasiness. In public, he played down the incident, claiming it was a mistake that had been exaggerated. Privately, he couldn't shake the sensation that things were about to get ugly. Bill Spencer was not someone to cross lightly, and Ridge understood that his actions had resulted in something far more serious than a hurt ego or a tarnished image. Bill's response took form over the course of several days. It was not impetuous or irresponsible, it was deliberate. He began making movements behind the scenes, using his power to quietly exert pressure where it would hurt Ridge the most. Business transactions were questioned. Partnerships were evaluated. Ridge's formerly unquestionable opportunities now appeared less solid. It became evident that Bill was not interested in a brief conflict. It was a long game. Katie watched everything with rising concern. She appreciated Bill's loyalty, but she did not want to start another disastrous feud. She confronted Bill, pleading with him to let it go and not escalate her fury into a full-fledged conflict. Bill listened, but his expression said everything she needed to know. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about respect, setting boundaries, and ensuring Ridge realized that his actions had repercussions. Their conversation was passionate but candid. Bill stated that seeing Ridge ignore Katie's feelings, seeing her push to her breaking point, triggered something primitive in him. He'd spent years trying to be a better, more measured man, but there were some boundaries he'd never let anyone breach. Katie was one of these lines. Ridge, seeing a shift in authority, attempted to regain control in his own way. He went out to supporters, tried to minimize the damage, and even pondered apologizing to Katie. However, each attempt felt empty, motivated by self-preservation rather than genuine contrition. When approached, Katie made it obvious that words alone would not repair what had been broken. Once damaged, trust was difficult to repair. The emotional consequences went beyond the immediate players. Brooke found herself split between devotion to Ridge and sorrow for Katie. She wrestled with her own guilt, wondering if her long relationship with Ridge had indirectly contributed to the suffering he caused others. Family dinners became strained, with talks carefully avoiding the implicit animosities seething beneath the surface. As the weeks passed, Bill and Ridge's animosity grew more intense. What began as a personal conflict escalated into a struggle that threatened to destabilize both of their worlds. The media's attention intensified, investors became anxious, and pressure mounted. Each man refused to back down, motivated by pride as well as principle. Katie attempted to focus on healing and restoring her sense of self outside of the tumult. She relied on her son, her work, and the peaceful moments of tranquility she created whenever feasible. However, she couldn't completely avoid the consequences of that slap. It had changed everything. It forced facts to the surface that could no longer be denied. In quieter moments, Katie thought on her connection with Ridge, finding patterns she had previously excused or ignored. Even though the smack was shocking, it served as a watershed moment. It signaled the end of her acceptance of being treated as an afterthought. She wasn't sure what her future held, but she knew it would be different. Bill felt both proud and protective as he watched Katie grow stronger. His conflict with Ridge was more than simply vengeance. It was about ensuring that the people he loved were never made to feel tiny or disposable again. Whether Ridge comprehended the lesson or not, Bill was determined to follow through. Ridge, isolated and increasingly defensive, began to comprehend the full cost of his actions. The slap was more than just a fit of rage. It was a mirror held up to his actions, reflecting back the harm he had caused. It was unclear whether he would learn from it or double down. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same. One rash act had sparked a chain reaction, exposing old wounds, kindling rivalries, and pushing everyone involved to face painful facts. Bill's declaration of war was not loud or theatrical, but it was clear. And as the battle lines were formed, the aftermath threatened to transform lives, relationships, and legacies in ways no one could have foreseen. As the anxiety spread, the ramifications of that one instant refused to recede into the background. Every subsequent conversation felt tense, as if everyone involved were dealing with the aftermath of an emotional explosion. Even ordinary interactions conveyed an implicit sense of anxiety, as if alliances had shifted and nothing was truly stable anymore. Bill became more reserved in public, and his confidence hardened into something colder and more strategic. He wasn't lashing out rashly. Instead, he acted with purpose, picking his battles wisely. Those close to him could tell that this wasn't the wild Bill of the past, but rather a man who had learnt patience and was willing to wait for the right opportunity to strike. The constraint made him even more dangerous. Ridge, despite his confidence, felt it. Every unexpected setback, delayed permission, or tense negotiation served as a reminder that Bill's influence reached well beyond what most people recognized. Katie, meanwhile, struggled with the emotional weight of it all. The slap gave her insight, but it did not take away her sorrow. She wondered how she had allowed herself to be damaged for so long, and why it had taken such a drastic step to finally draw a line. Despite the remorse, there was an increasing sense of empowerment. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen not only by Bill but also by herself. Ridge tried to distract himself with work, focusing his efforts on drawings and meetings, but the distraction never lasted. Doubt crept in at quiet moments, causing him to confront painful realities about his own actions and the individuals he had taken for granted. Pride commanded him to stay firm, but deep down he knew something had changed irreparably. As the days grew into weeks, the conflict shifted from fury to transformation. Everyone involved was evolving, whether they wanted to or not. The slap was no longer an act of wrath, but rather a spark. And when their emotions settled into something deeper and more permanent, the question remained, could any of them actually walk away unscathed, or would this conflict eventually consume them all?